If you are looking to add some decoys to your spread this season, or you want to buy your very first Mallard duck decoys, then this video is for you. So I want to quickly list out my top 6 picks, and the first is going to be these Dakota X-Treme fully flocked. Next is going to be the Avian X Topflight. Then we have the Northern Flight Oversized Mallards, the Lifetime or Heyday FlexFloat Mallards, the Flambeau Master Series, and then I've got to include a spinning wing decoy, the Lucky Duck HD. So before I go into the criteria on why I picked these 6 decoys, I want to quickly cover my number 1 pick, which is going to be the Dakota X-Treme fully flocked Mallards. I've been using them for about 5 years. They hold up fairly well. All I did before I brought this inside was give it a quick spray with water. You're definitely going to see some wear and tear over time, but overall I really like the size and the carve on these decoys, and I really like the contrast on them as well. Then you get that flocking that reduces the glare. I think they're a very realistic, good looking decoy, probably my favorite out of this list. Before I get into the rest of the detailed reviews, I want to quickly cover some of the criteria that I used to select these decoys. When you want to specifically look at decoy realism, I surveyed over 300 duck hunters, and around 50% of them specifically stated that Avian X was the most realistic decoy brand. So there's a lot of opinion when it comes to what decoy is the most realistic. A lot of it comes down to personal preference, but if you want to rely on the vast majority of duck hunters, Avian X definitely wins out. The next factor you need to consider when you're looking for decoys is durability. You don't want to buy your nice painted decoy, take it out on 2 hunts, and have all the paint fall off. So pretty standard Avian X, Dakota decoys, those are great brands. I've had excellent luck with durability on them. Really, you don't have to worry about durability too much until you get into some of the more budget decoy brands. Another factor that you want to consider when looking for duck decoys is the size of the decoy. The larger the size, obviously it's going to be a little more challenging to transport. It's going to take up more space in the boat, but also it's going to give you more visibility. So if you're hunting an area where there's a lot of open water and you need that better visibility, it's probably worth considering going to an oversized duck decoy. And the last factor that I like to consider is weight. A great way to cut down on weight is look for less traditional options like silhouettes or windsocks. But if you're wanting to stick with the standard Mallard floating decoy, then a lot of the decoys out there are pretty similar in weight. You're not going to notice a huge difference going from one brand to the other, with the exception of some of the foam style decoys. Those can really cut down on a lot of weight. So with those factors in mind, let's look at some specific reviews on the individual decoys. We'll start with my top pick, the Dakota X-Treme fully flocked decoy. This decoy I've been hunting with for about 4 to 5 seasons. I want to give you a kind of a closer look. It definitely shows some wear. You can see the flocking has wore off a little bit. However, they do sell, and most decoy companies are going to sell replacement heads, so you can really freshen them up a little bit. This decoy hasn't seen any touch-up paint. That's just what it looks like after 4 to 5 seasons of use. I personally really like fully flocked decoys. I think they look great, especially on those sunny days. I think having a fully flocked decoy makes a big difference. One thing that people don't like as much on the fully flocked decoys is they tend to get a little dirtier. However, I'm not sure if I necessarily agree. If you're dragging them through the mud, yes, they're gonna pick up mud, but so is a painted decoy, and really the same cleaning process applies. I mean, I hose them down outside, and you can see this decoy doesn't look brand new, but it's definitely a serviceable, huntable decoy. Next on the list is the Avian X Topflight. This is the version from Cabela's. It has a flocked head. What I really like about these decoys is that little bit of flex and give that they have. So your paint is not as likely to chip off on these. You'll see it more kind of wear in. And so you can kind of look on the side. That's kind of what you'll see some of the paint wear will look like over time. But overall, they're a very realistic decoy, excellent paint durability, and if you're looking for just kind of a standard Mallard floating decoy and you want that top end realistic look, then this is a great option. A couple things I'll cover that some people don't like is these swim clips here. So these aren't actually fully enclosed. You can pop a line in and out of that. So your traditional rig will go ahead and get hooked up through one of these holes, and then you can clip your decoy line into one of these so that on calmer days you might get a little more motion. On windy days you can keep that forward line so the decoy isn't going all over the place. I don't see very many people wanting to take the time to clip decoys in if you're going to use Texas rigs. If you're using a standard rig where you wrap the cable up, then this makes a lot of sense. One other thing that I'm not a huge fan on the Avian X is these holes are very tiny, and so this is kind of a standard clip for a jerk rig or for a Texas rig, and you can see it's kind of a pain to pop in and out of that. So if you use these decoys with a jerk rig and you're constantly clipping and unclipping them, it's a huge pain to get this clip on with gloves. A simple fix is drill the hole out. So I mean, that's not really a huge knock on these decoys. Next on the list is the Cabela's Oversized Mallard duck decoys. These are a slightly less realistic, lower cost decoy when compared to the Avian X and the Dakotas. They're a great option if you want a larger size decoy and you're not looking to spend a ton of money. They do offer some of the best bang for the buck in terms of being a quality decoy at a affordable price. Some of the first decoys that I ever used were the Cabela's Northern Flight brand of decoy. They held up great for several years. However, I do think you're going to see more paint chip and more paint wear with that decoy than you will some of the higher end Dakota, Avian X brands of decoys. The next decoy on the list that I want to cover is the Lifetime or Heyday FlexFloat Mallards. So this is a great decoy if weight is super critical to you. If you're only taking 6 or a dozen decoys in and you're walking in a half, 1 mile, 2 miles into public land and you want to cut down on your weight as much as possible, this would be an option that I would strongly consider. I personally haven't hunted with these decoys, but every year I consider them just because who doesn't want to carry less weight in on the walk-in when you're hunting? One thing that's really neat about these decoys is they have a removable keel weight. So you can put the keel weights in if you want them self-righting, which means you can just basically throw the decoy out and it's gonna sit upright every single time. Or you can remove those weights out of the keel to save a little extra weight on the walk-in, but then you're not going to be able to just throw them out from one spot. You're probably going to need to go hand place those decoys. For me personally, I don't see much of the point of keeping the keel weights in those decoys because that makes them fairly comparable to a standard duck decoy. And if you're specifically buying these for the lightweight EVA foam, then you're going to want to cut as much weight as possible, and you're probably not setting out a large spread of these. The last traditional floating decoy on the list is going to be the Flambeau Master Series decoys. These are on the list for people who are looking for a true budget decoy. However, they're not going to be the most durable. You're going to see the paint chip off on them. They're not the most lifelike or realistic. They really are a starter budget decoy, which there's nothing wrong with that. I personally have several budget decoys that I use, and I find that after a season and the paint is really wore off, I'll just take them into the garage, paint them all black, flock them black, and then I have a really high visible duck decoy that can be used in situations where I want that extra visibility, and then that paint and flocking holds up way better than the factory paint. So if you're truly on a budget or you don't mind repainting your decoys, then the Flambeau is worth a consideration. The last decoy that I want to cover is a spinning wing decoy. When it comes to spinning wing decoys, I'm a big fan of Lucky Duck. I think they do a lot of things way better than the competition. So I love this stake mounting design. The stake just goes in there and then it's a bungee cord that gets strapped to the stake. So if you've ever moved decoys around mid-hunt and you've used a different brand that doesn't have this design, you pick the decoy up and you start carrying it, and all of a sudden the decoy plops off into the water. So I love the bungee. Another feature that I really like about the Lucky Ducks is just the battery setup. This one runs off of 4 AA's with a kind of a standard 9-volt plug. And so the thing that I really like about it though is it's the same Decoy compartment size that accepts your 6-volt battery. So this can slip in there. All you would need to do is hook up these terminals to a standard 9-volt battery plug, and you'd be able to alternate between a 6-volt battery, which is rechargeable, or 4 AA's that you can easily keep in your blind bag without adding a lot of weight. And lastly, I really love the remote system. So you can turn the Decoy on with a switch, and then it stays on and running. You don't even need the remote. However, if you want to use the remote, you can simply flip it on and then turn the Decoy off. And then the Decoy is controlled. You'll get the little red blinking lights, and the Decoy will be controlled with the remote. The remote itself has a simple on-off on the side of the remote to save the remote battery, and then an on-off button for turning the Decoy itself on and off, along with an optional timer mode for the Decoy. So very simple and reliable remote system. So to wrap this up, my number 1 pick has to go to the Dakota X-Treme fully flocked Decoy. I think it just has a little better contrast. I love that it's fully flocked, and I think it's a great option if you're looking to add some decoys to your spread or just starting off with 1 or 2 dozen decoys. I hope you have found this video informative and helpful. If you have and you're interested in more content, you can go over to kayakguys.com and subscribe to our email list.
Oh, we wake up at the crack of dawn to sit in our kayaks all day long. We won't tell you any lies because we are the Kayak Guys.